You hear it all the time, right? Electric cars are just more efficient. But what does that really mean when the rubber hits the road? Is it just a tiny edge, or is it this massive game-changing advantage? Well, today, we're going to dig into the physics and find out. The whole conversation usually kicks off with this pretty wild claim that a normal gasoline car needs 4 times more raw energy than an EV to do the exact same thing. Yeah, 4 times. I mean, that just sounds kind of nuts, right? But is it actually true? Is this just some marketing buzzword, or is there some real hardcore physics going on behind the scenes? That's exactly what we're going to unpack, looking at the science behind how both of these cars work.
Okay, before we dive any deeper, let's just quickly clear something up that gets people mixed up all the time: the difference between power and efficiency. Think of it like this. Power is how much energy your car is using this very second just to keep cruising. But efficiency, that's the total amount of energy it took to get you all the way from point A to point B. Getting that straight is going to be super important for everything else we're about to cover.
All right, so let's put some real numbers on that 4x claim. To drive 100 kilometers, a typical gas car has to burn through about 65 to 75 kilowatt hours of energy locked inside its fuel. An EV making that exact same trip, it only needs 15 to 20 kilowatt hours. So where on earth does all that extra energy in the gas car go? Well, it boils down to 2 simple words: wasted heat. And this is where we get into the really cool stuff, the laws of thermodynamics. See, the main problem with a gasoline car isn't the fuel itself. It's the whole process of turning that fuel into forward motion, a process that is just incredibly wasteful. And that really gets to the heart of the matter. The internal combustion engine, or ICE, is basically a heat engine. It works by creating thousands of tiny, controlled explosions to push pistons up and down. But in that crazy process, a whopping 70 to 75% of all the energy in your gasoline is just lost. It doesn't push your car forward, it just heats up the engine block and the air around you. And when you see it side by side like this, wow, it tells the whole story. With gasoline, you're unlocking all this potential, but only a little sliver of it actually turns the wheels. The rest, that huge chunk, literally just vanishes as heat. An electric motor, on the other hand, is a whole different beast. About 90% of the electricity it pulls from the battery goes directly into making the car move. It's just a much more direct way of doing things. So where's all that heat going in a gas car? Well, it's blasting out of your exhaust pipe, it's getting pumped away by your radiator, and it's created by all the friction from the moving parts in the engine and transmission. An EV has pretty much none of that, and even better, it's got a secret weapon: regenerative braking. That system actually captures the energy you'd normally lose as heat when you slow down and sends it right back into the battery. Okay, so the physics is really interesting, right? But let's be real, what does this actually mean for your bank account? Let's translate this energy difference into cold, hard cash. All right, let's use some pretty typical European prices here and imagine a 100-kilometer trip. For our EV, using 15 kilowatt hours at 30 cents a pop, that trip is going to cost you €4.50. Now the gasoline car, it needs 7 liters of fuel at €1.80 per liter, making that same trip cost €12.60. So just do the quick math. That means for every 100 kilometers you drive, you're paying more than €8 out of your own pocket for basically nothing but wasted heat. That adds up incredibly fast. But hold on, this comparison is for a typical gas car. What happens if we're not talking about your average run-of-the-mill engine? Right, so that big 4x energy gap and the huge cost difference, that all applies when we're talking about average cars. But what happens if we pit the EV against a really efficient modern diesel engine? And you know, this is a totally fair point. You might be thinking, hang on, my car is way better than that. A lot of modern diesels are incredibly efficient, barely sipping 4 liters of fuel for every 100 kilometers. So, how does that change the math? Well, it changes things a lot. At 4 liters per 100 kilometers, the total energy you're using is about 38 kilowatt hours. Now, compare that to the EV's 15 to 20. Suddenly, that huge 4x gap isn't 4x anymore. It shrinks all the way down to about 2x. The EV is still ahead for sure, but that massive advantage just got cut in half. And that has a huge impact on the cost. Our EV trip is still €4.50. But the hyper-efficient diesel? That same trip now costs just €7.20. The EV is still cheaper to run, absolutely, but the difference is way smaller. So this shows that the type of gas engine definitely matters. But there's one more piece to this puzzle that might be the most important one of all.
And that final piece of the puzzle is where you drive.
The actual efficiency you get from both cars changes like crazy depending on whether you're stuck in stop-and-go traffic or just cruising down the highway. This is where it all comes together. In city traffic, man, the EV is just in its happy place. Every single time you hit the brakes for a traffic light, it's putting a little juice back into the battery. And when you're stopped completely, it's using zero energy. A gas car is doing the exact opposite. It's at its absolute worst, just sitting there idling, burning fuel for nothing. That huge 4x efficiency gap comes roaring right back. But get out on the open highway, and things start to shift a bit. A modern diesel can just sit in its top gear, humming along at its most efficient point. Meanwhile, the EV doesn't get to use its regenerative braking trick as much, and it has to fight against wind resistance. That efficiency gap narrows a lot.
So at the end of the day, the EV's two biggest party tricks, getting energy back when you slow down and using absolutely nothing when you're stopped, are basically superpowers in a city environment. That's where its thermodynamic advantage is just impossible to argue with.
So is that 4x energy gap real? Yeah, it absolutely is. But it's not some fixed universal number. It's more like a sliding scale that changes depending on the exact car you're driving and, maybe more than anything, where you're driving it. And that means the most efficient car isn't just about the technology under the hood. It's about matching that technology to your actual life. So have a think about your own daily commute. Are you mostly in traffic jams, or are you on the open highway? The answer to that question might be the real secret to figuring out which car is truly the most efficient for you.